Roots, stems, leaves, flowers, fruits, seeds. Roots, stems, leaves, flowers, fruits, seeds. Say it with me. Roots, stems, leaves, flowers, fruits, seeds. Now say it to me.
Roots, stems, leaves, flowers, fruits, seeds.
There we go. Congratulations, everybody. You just learned the 6 basic parts of the plant. When we talk about something as a fruit or a vegetable, we're talking about one of those 6 parts of a whole plant. Let me see a show of hands. Raise your hand if you are a parent or a guardian, even if your kids are grown. Now keep your hand raised if you really viscerally disagree with either of the statements here. Kids like games, they don't like vegetables. Not a lot of hands left. I think it's something we're kind of used to as a norm. Games are fun, vegetables are a chore. But it doesn't have to be our norm. And I'm the farm manager and educator at a nonprofit in Durham, North Carolina that empowers youth by teaching them how to grow and cook their own fresh food. And one of the tools that I use in order to overcome that unease at trying new foods, especially vegetables, is I use games. I create games that teach them core skills and increase their familiarity and create new equitable norms to help them face the challenges in their lives. I want to draw a distinction really quickly between play and games. Play is an activity that's done for its own sake. A game is an activity that's done with an objective in mind, usually winning. And to give you an example, you can play dress up, and there might be rules to dress up. You might be dressing up in a particular style, and you may have the best outfit. But you don't really win dress up. It's an experience. Games we're familiar with. Kids come up with games all the time. They make up rules to games that you try to play with them to their own advantage, and we have games ready-made for kids to play. And when you think about it, games are all an educational experience. They're either training us for a specific skill set, or they're rehearsing a situation that we'll end up living out in our real lives. And when you think about it that way, we've got games that teach all kinds of things. We have games that teach simple things, counting, colors, shapes. We have games that teach complex things, ruthless competition. Because for the young people that I work with, exploitation and gentrification are not games. Those are real factors in their lives. They're disrupting their lives and destroying their communities. Here are a couple of maps to show you what I mean. Well, on one map, we have the racial dot map out of UVA. Every dot is a person. Using census data from the last US Census, they've created a map where every dot is a person broken down by how they identified racially. So all the blue dots are everyone who identified as white. All the red dots are everyone who identified as Asian. All the green dots are everyone who identified as black, and all the yellow dots are people who identified as Latinx. Now when we look at the other map, it colors census tracts by their access to fresh, affordable, easily accessed, non-packaged food. So how close are you to a source of fresh produce? And you can see at a glance, if all of the neighborhoods that are highlighted are places that are low income and have low food access, they're all of the communities of color in Durham, North Carolina. And again, you can go online and you can look this up and see what your city looks like. We have a deeply inequitable food system that shuts communities of color out of access to healthy foods. So when I say that the kids that I work with are struggling against poor food access and gentrification, I hope you can see what I mean. To give you more of an idea, on the racial dot map around Holloway Street, that's the area I work in. It's northeast Durham. It's 55 to 75% black. The rest is Latina. It's all communities of color. And they're all highlighted on the other map as places that have poor access to fresh food. So what would we need to give young people today if we were going to train a new generation of leaders in communities of color on how to combat gentrification and poor food access? Okay, the first thing that they would need to know, they would need to know how to grow their own food. They need an alternative system that circumvents those inequalities so they can produce food for themselves. So they need to know how to identify different fruits and vegetables, how to grow them, what plants to plant together, and when to plant different plants. Practical skills. They also need a collaborative spirit. They need to know, how do you make use of the resources you do have available? How do you leverage your social capital? And how do you work with the other people in your community in order to create a better system? So what I want to do is go over a couple of games that I made exactly to those points. Games that would help them overcome those challenges and give them what they needed to know in order to face those challenges. The first game is Oregano, the Veggie card game. That's a game the kids named themselves. It's a simple matching game. You try to match one of the cards in your hand with the card face up in the middle of the table. Here we have a tomato. You can match that in one of two ways. One is by matching it to another fruit or vegetable that's in the same family. Tomatoes are in the Solanaceae family. Believe it or not, our kids have no problem saying all those crazy Latin names because they've practiced so many times by playing this game. So we could match a tomato with anything else in the Solanaceae family: peppers, eggplant, potato. The other thing we could match it with is anything where it's the same part of the plant on a different plant. So what does oregano do then? Oregano gets kids more familiar with their food. When you give someone a plate of mystery mush, are you really that excited when they don't want to eat it? They don't know what it is. If they can't connect it to a real live thing, a whole plant, they're going to be, of course they're going to be skeptical about eating it, right? They have no idea what it is that you're really giving them. And we oftentimes don't really have a great idea of what the food is that we're eating. And so this increases the familiarity with the foods to overcome some of that unease that kids are experiencing at trying new things and helps them connect it to something in the real world. The next game I want to talk about is called crop companions. Companion planting is probably the most complex concept in urban gardening. In urban gardening, you've always got a limited amount of space. If space is at a premium, you need to know what all you can comfortably cram together in a limited amount of space and what plants will actually play nice with each other. This is something that is usually covered by a very mind-bogglingly complex chart with a ton of columns and rows and a million different little codes that you have to keep track of. Here's one of them. Now this chart is actually 3 times longer than what you're seeing on this slide. I just cut it off so that it would fit there width-wise. And this one's actually simpler than most. It only has 2 codes, a smiley face and an X. You find the combination of plants, it works, or it doesn't. Much easier to use as a reference tool than a million different little symbols or like abbreviations. But it's also not teaching you why the combination works or doesn't work. And so what's great about crop companions is that it takes all of that complicated information we just saw and it presents it to you in a visually streamlined format that you can manipulate really quickly. If you were to throw 3 random vegetables into your bed, it's going to take you 3 months to find out whether or not that combination worked. But you can play a game of crop companions in 10 minutes and try out 3 different combinations in that amount of time. And the relative score that you get on each of your combinations gives you an indication of how well those plants would actually work together in the real world. And I have a story to show how well this actually worked. After the second day of playing this with elementary school students in a summer camp program last year, the kids walked out of the classroom into the farm space, and they immediately started making fun of me. There was a bamboo teepee there that they had walked by for multiple days in a row. It's just something with some plants growing on it. But after they played this game, they immediately recognized that's cherry tomatoes and that's cucumbers. You can't plant 2 climbers together. That's a bad set. And that's exactly the language of the game. So climbers is one of the codes in the game that describes the growth habit of the plant. And they're right. In the game of crop companions, I could not have made a set, bad or no, with 2 plants that grow in the exact same way because they'd fight over the space in the exact same way. And so they were able to acquire this theoretical knowledge, and I mean, we played it for like an hour, 2 days. So after 2 hours of playing, they were able to not only recognize those plants, but also to recognize the horrible mistake I had made. I mean, it was pretty, but they were fighting over the space, and it didn't create this picturesque thing that I was going for. So it was probably my best mistake, though, because it was a fantastic opportunity for them to claim ownership over the space and really to become the teacher and point out my mistake to me. Okay, the last game I want to talk about is a food access game. Really creative title. So I wanted a game that modeled some of the inequity that we saw at a glance in those maps. So I created a game that had really unbalanced starts. Some people start with almost nothing. Some people start with a lot of money, or some people can produce a little bit of vegetables or a lot of vegetables. So it's just totally uneven. And what I wanted was to play out the injustice in our food system so that then we could have a dialogue about how it was impacting them for real and connect it to some of the things they were learning and mastering by playing these games and by farming in our program. And it didn't work. And it didn't work in the best way ever because they used a resource that the game didn't account for, which was their social capital, which I mentioned before, as being so important in building resilience. The people they were playing this game with were the other kids that they see every day in an after-school program. They're their friends. So they didn't just take their $10, good luck finding a week's worth of healthy food. I mean, seriously, who could do that, right? And we don't want to shame people for making use of the resources they have available. We just want to make better resources available. Well, these kids didn't take that line down. So they went around to everyone else and they tried to cut preferential deals. They got like one good deal early on. They were able to leverage all of that for later. And with kids, that sounds like whining. But they were doing it really effectively. And where they weren't comfortable advocating for themselves, someone else would step in and advocate for them. Don't make them give you 9 ears of corn for 1 avocado. You have plenty of money. Just give them a good deal. And so what we saw at the end really was that by working together and making use of all of the resources that they had available, not just the ones the game said had value, they were actually able to all help each other and buoy each other. So no one really crashed and burned playing that game. Everyone had enough food. Everyone had a good variety of food. And everyone had a good amount of healthy, fresh food. So really, they all worked together, and what I think is so fantastic about it is I didn't plan that. They had the ability to do that within the game because the rules were kind of loose, and given the choice between being ruthlessly competitive and being collaborative, they chose to be collaborative on their own. So give them that leeway, and they can make those good decisions and live out those equitable norms themselves. Now, play with your kids. The games I made are really simple, but they teach things that are really concrete and easy to understand. They weren't very difficult to make, and I used a lot of feedback from the kids themselves when I created those games. So find the young people in your lives, whether they're your kids or just some kids you see all the time. They're someone else's kids and they're in your life. Tell them that you want to play a game with them about something you value. It may not be food access. It may be eliminating racial inequality or criminal justice reform. Whatever it is, you can make a game with them that they can then play so that you can kind of reinforce the norms that you want them to have and live out as their truth in their world, so that they can make that true for all of our worlds. Last time, 6 parts of the plant.
Roots, stems, leaves, flowers, fruits,
Seeds. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Next time we play oregano.